Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathways series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Devin Reese, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in integrative biology into several exciting industry verticals such as publishing, but many others as well. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. Gertrude Nantra.
Hello, everyone. Dr. G. Nantra here, and I'm excited today to be interviewing Dr. Devin Reese. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you, Gertrude. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. So, I'm always jumping in with my first question around, you telling us about your educational background and what led to your decision to what you do now.
Well, when I was in middle school, I fell in love with animal behavior, and it was partly thanks to my dad, because he gave me a book on some of the earliest pioneering research on dolphin communication. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that research. So it would have been in the 70s.
Oh, really?
And it was really the first time scientists were saying maybe all these vocalizations are a language of sorts and decoding them. And so I read the book when I was in 7th grade, and I said to myself, are you serious? People can do this for a living? Watch and listen to animals. So from that point on, it was clear to me that I was going to work on some angle of animal behavior. So then I got my college degree in animal behavior, which didn't exist at Harvard. So I had to make my own major. And I just pulled together these really specialized classes from biology, anthropology, and psychology. And then I was lucky. I got to work in a couple famous labs like B.F. Skinner's behavioral lab, where he was looking at whether pigeons can demonstrate the kind of insight that we think is unique to humans. So, and then I worked with E.O. Wilson, who of course everybody knows now, but he wasn't so famous then for biodiversity. He was famous for his studies of behavior. And then I ended up getting my PhD at Berkeley. And I realized by that time that I wanted to be in the field, because I had done some work in labs, and a lot of biology work does involve needing to sacrifice animals, whether you're taking blood samples for DNA, whatever it is. And I was pretty much a wuss about that, and realized that also by taking a course at Harvard on ethology, which is the study of animals in the field, I realized that's what I want to do. Again, with kind of disbelief that people could really get paid to go outside and watch other species behave. So I got my doctorate studying turtle behavior in the Trinity River system of Northern California.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so what do you do now, and what led to your decision to work outside of academia?
Oh, that's a long story, but no, let's put it this way. From the time I entered graduate school, I know it sounds funny, but I had no intention of working in academia. I was working in Florida on a natural areas inventory project, which meant all day I was with my boss, who I'm still very good friends with. We had a great time, and we were basically wading into wetlands up to our shoulders. And I was young and naive enough to do that, even though there are, little alligator wallows and stuff, carrying clipboards over our head and recording all the wildlife we saw. And it was during that experience, which was between college and grad school, that he said to me, you should go get a PhD. And I said, well, why would I do that when I'm going to work in conservation? So my orientation by that time was I want to do something that applies science to helping other species remain on Earth. So because of that mentor, I went to get a PhD. He said, you'll just have more opportunities, and you're so deeply interested in it, it makes sense. Right. So I actually never thought during grad school about academia. I just thought I'll get this degree and then find a way to make a difference in something conservation related.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that there are more and more people who are going to graduate school and thinking, I don't necessarily want to use this degree within academia. And so this is validating for those people, right? That you could pursue this degree, finish it, and your intention never was to work in academia in the first place. And you don't have to feel trapped by any such knowledge, right? And so that's very, very helpful. So, Devin, you worked in conservation and animal behavior. For somebody that wants to enter into that field today, into either one of those fields, because it's a broad field, right? So, somebody that wants to enter into this field today, could you talk a little bit about what I know it's, like you were saying, like things from the 70s and stuff. And so it may seem like it's a long time ago, but I think some of those lessons are still relevant today. What was your application process like, the interview process like, and what advice would you give to somebody trying to enter into your career, your career trajectory, your career path today?
Well, let me say first that things have changed a tremendous amount in a positive way, in that now, if you have a degree in ecology, environmental science, behavior, biology, there are so many opportunities. When I went to UC Berkeley, I stood up at a meeting my first year there and I said, I'm going to start a conservation club. And the chairman of the department said, please sit down. We don't do conservation here. Because that's how much it was oriented towards basic research. I mean, it's hard to believe, right? So things have changed so tremendously that now you can get that PhD in some kind of, scientific discipline, and you can go work in a whole variety of settings. Like every government agency, has places for people with those degrees. All these NGOs, all these private sector organizations, the Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund. I mean, there are tons of them. There are tons of consulting firms that are sending people in the field to do this kind of work. And I actually now work in science communication, so we can talk about that. But I just think we've kind of bust wide open the possibilities for people with backgrounds in science, and that someone getting that degree today can be truly excited about the possibilities other than academia. And there may even be people that went in thinking, of course, I'm going to become an academic. And then for various reasons, maybe they find some of the work too tedious. Maybe they've changed during the experience of the program. Maybe they've gotten really fired up to make a difference that's more visible in terms of saving species. So I think a lot of people are probably coming out of PhD programs now ready to apply their skills. And so right after my PhD program, knowing that I wanted to do something applied, I took a postdoc, but it was not an academic postdoc. It's called the AAAS program. It's with the American Association for Advancement in Science. And they specialize in finding people who have PhDs in science who want to put their skills to use elsewhere. So I got this wonderful postdoc, and I moved to Washington because I'd been doing field work in California, and spent a couple years going all over the world on different projects that were related to my background in this capacity as a AAAS fellow. It was amazing. So that's a really exciting route for people who are getting their PhDs and decide, I don't want to do academia now, maybe I'm going to do it later, is to look into the AAAS postdoc. And that introduced me to environmental communication, because I ended up extending that and doing it overseas, AAAS postdoc, and got sent to Panama and ended up there for 3 years working with the USAID Panama mission, which provides support. USAID, for those who don't know it, provides support to other countries that are considered in the process of development. And in this case, it was ecological support, because it was when the Panama Canal was transitioning from the U.S. control back to the country of Panama. And so I got to go there to help make that transition by sharing knowledge about watershed management, environmental science. So that's really where I formally, I guess, moved into science communication, was at that juncture.
That's amazing. First of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing how broad this area is, because like you're saying, until you started mentioning NGOs and consulting and all these organizations that you could potentially work with, right? My knowledge on people getting degrees within ecology and in the environmental science is very, very limited. But and maybe for some people that's all they knew, right? And so thank you for shedding light on that. And then I want to move on, and then thank you for shedding light also on how you went somewhere and how this applies across borders, right? There are certain career paths that I feel end up being very localized. And it sounds from your description that you could apply this degree anywhere in the world and still be really relevant and helpful, right? And it aligns with so many people's values, especially if you have a value of conservation and sustainability and environmental protection. So thanks again for sharing that. Now let's come back a little bit and talk about your career in scientific communications. What do you do within scientific communications, and what does a day in the life look like?
Well, that has changed over time as well. So first, I'll just describe in the present, and we can backtrack if we want. But because of COVID and work at home, since a bit before COVID, I am entirely remote. So
Okay.
my only office is in my home or a cafe or on a train or a bus or a plane if I'm traveling. So I have a laptop. I have a very light double screen that attaches to it. And I mean, when I visit my daughter in London, people taking pictures of me on the London Tube with my double screen out. Writing about science. So that's kind of my mojo now, which I absolutely love. I wouldn't have expected to, because I also really loved working in office settings where you go and you see colleagues. But so I just have an unbelievable amount of flexibility, honestly. At all times, I'll keep like about 4 contracts to different organizations. That seems to be about the right amount. And then sort of decide in the different parts of the day, which one am I going to work on now, to me, and their deadlines, of course, but it feels like a very flexible sort of life. I can work at night. I can work at 4 a.m. I have almost no meetings. And there too, I feel like meetings are a mixed blessing. On the one hand, the collaboration with colleagues is exciting. On the other hand, anyone who's worked for an institution knows that we spend hours and hours and hours in meetings just talking over words, and it can become really frustrating too. So I've become very much oriented towards productivity, just like getting a lot of science writing out on the streets for popular audiences. So right now I do have about 4 contracts that are all kind of long-term ones. So I'm the executive editor for Natural History magazine. And I love that because I grew up with that magazine, and print magazines are having a rough time. Oh, here's one right here. Yes. See, this is the most recent issue right
Oh,
here. And so as the executive editor, I basically manage our news section, which is perfect for me because I'm always watching the most recent scientific publications. And then I have a cadre of like 12 science writers, and I'll assign stories to them every month to get into the magazine. Occasionally I write a piece. I think I have a piece in this one because I just published a book as well. My first book on tortoises.
nice.
Everything about tortoise natural history. So I have this story in this issue, but most of the time I'm managing other writers for this project. This is Sex on the Half Shell, and it's really a graphic picture, isn't it?
Lovely. I love it.
And then I work for a media company with a completely different audience. If you imagine that natural history has a more traditional audience of people that know a lot about science. Apparently, David Attenborough has been a subscriber to the magazine, whereas the media company I work for, which is called Fragment Media, is for a much younger, poppier audience. But what I like is that because of my background, I'm always basing everything I write on primary research. I'm not making the mistake of trusting a secondary source without going back to the primary and validating. So even for this really poppy newsletter that I produce twice a week for the media company, it's all taking people to primary studies. So I'm kind of proud of that in terms of your question, you know, that you mentioned to me before about how we bring our prior skills into these new fields.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I've essentially become a science journalist, but I
Right.
didn't come from journalism school. I
Right.
came from being a scientific researcher myself. So it just gives me a different lens on writing about other people's research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's amazing. And so during your day, I love that you said you don't have many meetings. So I think we all have love-hate relationships with meetings. And so but then it sounds really interesting that you are basically a contractor working with multiple companies within science communications, writing and producing content within your field, which is exciting because my day my 9 to 5 job is in medical communications and
Oh,
just writing about cell therapy workflows. And so it's really interesting the different ways in which we can take our skills and take our knowledge. And you went from being a researcher to being a communicator. Now, for me, I know that the skill of being able to take a complex topic and breaking that down, right? The skill of being able to look at data and interpret the data has been really helpful for me as somebody in medical communications. And I'm imagining the same for you in scientific communications. What other skills would you say have been useful to you in moving from being a researcher to doing scientific communications?
that's a fine question. And I don't have a pat answer, but if I reflect on that, I mean, there are some answers people tend to give because I've also conducted interviews and people tend to say, oh, I have my analytical skills. But I think we can somehow do better than that. I mean, in my case, I originally chose science because I love to work independently. Like I love to spend at Harvard, I'd spend just days and hours in the library stacks deep in the bottom. One time I actually got locked in on a Friday night because I forgot and they locked the whole building. So to me, science writing is that same, it's very immersive. You know, you have to put your whole brain on it. And it's very different, say, than my husband's job, where my husband's an expert in collaborative decision making. So all his work is about collaboration, whereas I really like just having this challenging topic, like sounds like what you do as well, and having to draw from different sources and sort of figure it out. And I'm just doing that by myself. You know, it's not really by myself because I'm relying on the writing of the hundreds and thousands of people who have gone before. I'm standing on them, but the actual work process is just me thinking, and it suits me. It sort of suited me in field research where I'd be out by myself with a radio antenna tracking turtles for all day long, and it suits me now when I just sit with my cup of tea and just think about a topic and read about it and try to bring it together in a way that other people can enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So, you know, I'm just thinking of with what you do currently. What would you say is the most challenging part of it, and what would you say is the part of it you enjoy the most?
Some of the stories I write are really challenging because I'm trying to be fair across scientific disciplines. So I'm not favoring ecology. I'm writing about space. I'm writing about technology. And so sometimes I get to these math stories, the kinds of things that get published in Quantum magazine. And I read them for the first time and I think I have absolutely no idea what the study is saying. Now, fortunately, I have a 22-year-old son who has become a mathematician. So at that juncture, I call him and I say, Owen, can you please read this study and can we have a chat? And he helps me. And then he'll read my final piece and make sure that it's accurate. So there are times when I reach out to colleagues, in this case, my son. My dad's a neuroscientist. There are many times over the years in this work and my prior work that I reached out to him to validate things. So when I need to, when it's just way beyond my field, I do that. But of course, as you spend more and more time writing about fields that are not your primary, you also get more comfortable. But I think that's the biggest challenge.
What do you enjoy about it the most?
I can't believe that every day I get up at my age, my ripe age, and I learn new things every single day. I mean, it's just such a privilege. I feel so privileged that I wake up and I just start reading all the latest science news and choosing things to write about. And so it just keeps me really entertained. I'm often sharing in a casual way with friends, whatever, because, for example, this morning I was writing about this new study that is linking some of the Neanderthal DNA variations that Homo sapiens are carrying from when we interbred way back when. It's linking it to autism. They found some gene variants that are correlated with autism. I mean, I just think it's wild. And I had a conversation with some house guests who are here about Neanderthals and autism, and given what we also know from anthropology about the different lifestyles of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, Neanderthals were much more solitary. They weren't as social. Is it possible that gene thing that was found relates to that too? And it sort of calls out all these questions about why is autism sort of even considered sort of
A disorder.
a disorder, because in fact we're all these packages of genes, and we now know that we're not pure Homo sapiens genes either. We have these other influences from little hanky-panky here and there with other species. So I think it's just fascinating. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So it shapes my whole life, honestly, the work that I do. And I know so many people who are my age, and their work is not even interesting to them anymore. They're punching the clock. So
Right.
I can imagine I might do this till I can't, whenever that is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a really good point, because one of the things that I've talked to people about in the past is really choosing a career that aligns with your values, right? But also one that you think you can see yourself doing for a really long time. And one that, and if one of your values is learning, then choose a career path that allows you to continuously learn and challenge yourself, right? And so it's really exciting to hear that you said that the part of your job you enjoy is that at this age, you still wake up and are still able to learn something new and weave that into conversation. And I bet it's always like so interesting to have conversations with you, because you're always full of something new, which is exciting, which is absolutely exciting, because I'm the similar way too. So as we land the plane and bring our conversation to a close, because I see the clock ticking. I told you it was going to go by fast. What piece of advice, maybe I haven't asked you a question regarding that, what piece of advice would you give to somebody that is interested in this area, wants to work in this area, that you haven't already shared?
Well, I like your advice, which is choose something that you really love. That's important, but there's also the practicality. So now that I'm 60, let's just get it out there. I'm 60 and I'm married, and my husband has a regular benefits scenario. I can do this own business, right?
That's right.
I couldn't have been able to at another juncture. So if you're coming out of grad school and you want to go into science communication, you may not want to freelance right away because it's too hard. You'll have to get your own benefits, but you can walk into so many organizations. Like you can go into the press office of any of the major organizations that have anything to do with science, whether that's National Science Foundation or any of the Smithsonian museums. They have a press office, and you can write science. So you can find settings where in your younger career, you're going to work full-time with benefits, right? And eventually, if you get to a place where in my case, it was having children, that I was like, okay, I don't that model. I don't want that model. And my husband agreed. So that allowed me to change to this kind of contractor model. But so I
Right.
think you have to, I agree. You're going to be spending the majority of your time on whatever this endeavor is that you choose. But you also need to make a living. You have to
Yeah.
kind of marry those two things.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, Devin. Thank you so much for
Thank
taking the time.
you.